It's Chris Martenson from Peak Prosperity. And if you guys pay attention, he's got, I have Tragedy and Hope on the shelf. He's got a copy of Tragedy and Hope on his shelf, just like Corbett has a copy on his shelf, just like Jay Dyer has on his shelf, because those who are up to date with the Anglo-American establishment and this very well-defined plan by the deep state to take America, to use us as the property manager and kind of the prophylactic so they can fuck over the world. That's been going on a long time. There's a lot of evidence to it. So anyway, Chris Martenson, he's a good researcher. He's PhD. He's very numbers-oriented, analytical, good thoughts to consider when you're trying to figure stuff out. Like, what has he seen? What's he noticing? These sort of things. Now, Scott, before we get into this, have you done any analysis on the original audio that everyone's been listening to and looking for stuff, but have you actually like looked at the audio?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen the well, I've seen people covering it briefly, just the waveforms, but I imagine that's what we're getting into. But I didn't personally, no.
Yeah, I didn't see the original analysis. I have a feeling that Martenson probably saw Mike Adams, the health ranger, who did an analysis of the sound, and then Chris is like, I'm going to do my own and see what I find, and that's respectable because I almost pulled it up and did the same thing, but then I'm going to be showing you guys 4 different videos. So anyway, I'm showing you Chris Martenson, and then I'm showing you Legally Armed American, I think is his name, who did another analysis that adds value and new information. So when you layer these two pieces together, now you got a real good estimation of what's going on or what you have to work with. So in this case, we're going about 7 minutes into Chris's audio analysis. He says it's 100% clear Trump and crowd were shot at by 2 separate people. That's not my claim. It's not even really his claim. He's saying it's in the evidence. Now, if we look at the evidence and we hear different things, or we say that's counter sniper team 2 returning fire, or we say that's the guys on the second floor returning okay, maybe, but you're going to have to put evidence on the table that says, here's how we know this, right? It can't be sources say, it can't be source congressmen, it can't be government sources. We need evidence, right? Which was what the whole mindset seminar earlier today was all about. So if you want to learn more, it'll be on Grand Theft World for a replay in that banner soon enough. Go ahead and sign up when you're over there. Now, we're going to look at this video about this far into it, and what he's covered is, some basics, and he does show you like this is where the shooter was killed and this sort of stuff. But when he gets into pulling the files, I was following along. And then at some point in here, he's going to bring up a second piece of footage and another audio file. And that's where things really got interesting, because at first I was like, Chris, why are you moving away from this argument and introducing a new piece of evidence? Why don't we just finish this and then do that? But what I learned was when you bring that other piece of audio in, you can hear from different direction that there's 2 different things going on much more clearly than the isolated mic on the stage that kind of has noise suppression and it's just picking up cracks like all kind of equally. It's not as good for the differentiation. Anyway, I gave this consideration with an open mind, knowing that I don't understand the thing already and I'm trying to understand. So we're going to parse this information together. Let's go to Chris Martenson of Peak Prosperity in the first of what is probably going to be a series of analyses that he's done on this audio.
Need to take a look at the other one. So way to go, Mike. Thank you for picking that up and doing that. All right. This is the audio file. I pulled it into a program called Audacity, right, off of that video. And I find on here 9 separate shots, okay? So I find 3, then a grouping of 5, and then one last one out there. Number 9, I think, this is the sniper shot that would have, I think, looks like it took out Crooks just above the left eyebrow. If you want to go look at those, or, the gross pictures, right? Obviously, he's all bloody and dead. They have that close-up picture of his face, right? And you can actually see a hole right about here over the left eyebrow. So we have those first 3 shots, then we have the 5, and then that last one. I'm not going to worry about the last one as much, but we're going to have to look at these first sets very, very carefully here. So here is video number 1. Just to orient ourselves, I count off of this video 15.8 seconds from the very first to the very last shot. So the AP article that said, Crooks took a shot and was neutralized by snipers within seconds. What they meant was 15.8 seconds, unless I have this story wrong. Next, we're going to look at these first 3 shots here so you understand how we can analyze the rest of them. And so here's the shot. This is the sonic crack. So that's the bullet is the blue arrows. And then the report is going to be the black arrows. So that's the crack, thump, crack, thump, crack, thump. And of course, it was the first bullet that nicked Trump's ear. And again, let me get my thing here. Here's what it sounds like. Okay, so now I've just isolated the sound. There it is. Okay, whoops, sorry. One last time just to make sure we're hearing this right. There's 0.22 seconds between the crack and the thump, and knowing a little bit about the type of the bullet that was used and the caliber of it and the air conditions and things like that, you can estimate the distance of the shooter and how far away the shooter was. So that 0.22 second gap between the crack and the thump is very important because it helps us identify that a gun is being shot from that distance. If there were any other lengths, like if we saw a crack thump, we would clearly see that that was 2 separate weapons because assuming the first and the last crack thumps were the same distance apart. So if there's any variation between the crack and the thump, that's when you say, oh, that's a different weapon. So that's one way. The other way is just the tenor, just the sound of the weapon. Does it sound different? Now, this is interesting. This woman here had put up a video on TikTok. I really wish we could get the unaltered, I call it unmolested. I don't need all the words put on there. And it's not a consistent video, so there's edits in there. So I can't, if it ran from beginning to end, we could tell more, but I'm suspecting that we can tell a lot from it. So we're going to bring it up here because this is one of the videos, only videos that I know about that shows, I think, the first stand victim getting shot. So here we go.
Side of Trump. I'm over on the far right or far left of Trump. These are the same bleachers. Watch the top left. These are the same exact bleachers. These are to the left of Trump.
See that?
Those shots.
Okay. What I've done here is, so I just want us to look at, I just pulled out that one tiny section. You can clearly see a bullet careening off of this railing up here, and it does it with enough force to atomize and vaporize. And so I think this is an important clue. We'll see. So let's just look at that over and over again. Pew! Did you see that? Again. Pew! See that? Okay, whoops. One more time. And again. So you can clearly see this shot happening. Now, this gentleman who's right, and get my laser pointer back, this gentleman right here is in a very, very distinctive American flag shirt of some kind. You can see him hunch over there a little bit, and I'm pretty sure that that shot that you see careening off the rail struck him first. And the reason I think that struck him first, because we showed this before, is from this video that's after the fact. We're on the right side of the stands. You can see he's being brought down. And you can see here, he's holding, let me get my laser pointer back. He's holding his right chest, holding that, right, with his left arm is coming over. So his right chest, I don't know the extent of his injuries. I can't find any updates in the media right now, so we're going to be watching out for that. But if he was struck in that upper right chest and the bullet still managed to take something off of the railing into a puff, we see a very clear puff there. I don't think that's a .223 round. .223 round, a little 55 or a 62 grain bullet. When they hit, they tend to tumble. This would have to have had enough force to have nicked Trump's ear, if I'm right about this being the first shot, nicked his ear, traveled in, struck this gentleman, and still had enough force to vaporize either the railing or that was the bullet itself atomizing. That was what that gray puff was. More likely that's a larger caliber round, but that's a guess, pure hypothesis, pure conjecture. I'm just throwing it out there as a placeholder. But that would be more consistent with something, say, in a 308, some 30 caliber sort of a round, something with enough energy to penetrate and still atomize and vaporize on the back railing. But again, just a guess. Doesn't matter, just speculation. It's kind of irrelevant. But again, if we're back here, again so I think you can see that puff right there. See that? Oops, sorry. and puff, puff, puff. So he's been hit, and also it's on his right side. So, and if you see how he's oriented, he's all the way up against the back with his right side tipped towards the back. So this is as high up as you can get. Now, the other thing I need to point out about that is he is all the way in the highest row of bleacher seats. Those things start roughly at about stage level, which is about 3.5, 4 feet in the air, and then they go up level, 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 level. So if you said it's, I don't know, a foot or foot and a half per level, he's clearly many feet up in the air, and he's standing. So that bullet that struck him has to be, I don't know, pick a number, 12, 15 feet in the air, pretty high up, and that's going to become important again in just a second. All right, so this is plausible for the first shot then, okay? We see here if the shots came from the rooftop shooter first, then comes here, comes across the podium. Trump would have been standing right about there and could have struck somebody standing in the back right where that gentleman was with the flag shirt who got hit. So that's entirely plausible, but except it's a little bit more consistent with a rising shot, because if we put the podium at about 3.5 feet, 4, let's call it 4, we'll put Trump at 6'3", but take 3 inches off, so 10 feet. 10 feet, that bullet goes whizzing by his ear. But if this is why we need all the trajectories, that's why we need all this mapped out, that's why we need an absolute accounting of every single shot taken. If that was the first shot that struck that gentleman, okay? And that's why if I had that unmolested video and I could piece it in, I could tell you exactly. So hold this as just a bunch of conjecture until we have more. But if that gentleman was struck by the same bullet that took Trump's ear, that means that thing must have been on a rising trajectory, because Trump's at 10 feet. And then further back, this guy, his chest is probably at 13, 14 feet. It's higher in the air. That would have been more consistent with a shot fired from lower down that was then rising instead of a shot fired from the roof, which would have been declining and coming down. I'm giving you this because this is going to be in a few slides. You're going to see why I'm making a point about this. Okay, so the audio from video 1, when we look at it here, the first 3 shots we can make complete sense of. Okay, fine. Then there's a 4th shot that arrives, and it does so with the bullet in a report at 0.212 seconds, close enough for government work here or rough analysis. Here's another bullet and a report, so that's the snap, crack. There's echoes. We see there's echoes, so the bullet makes a and then this sound is echoing, probably off of one of the buildings. We have a lot of flat surfaces back there. So the microphone is here, supersonic crack, and the crack makes it to the microphone, and then it echoes off of something. And so we see the crack and an echo. We could probably very, very accurately estimate how far away that flat surface is off of that echo, and then you get the report itself. Crack, thump, crack, thump. So shots 4 and 5, I'm still pretty good with shots 4 and 5 in terms of being able to make sense of them. From 6 on, man, it gets all kinds of weird. And I'm not going to take you through the weirdness from video 1. To try and resolve what's happening with those other shots, we're now going to turn to video 2. This really clarifies everything and makes the entire case. So we'll listen to it up through the shots, which is about 20 seconds of tape. Yeah, I won't take you through all the screaming and everything. And by the way, not for nothing, but screaming, I don't understand people who just start screaming and then just don't stop in an event like this. So listen past this. It's there's a lot of screaming going on, but you can clearly hear shots 1, 2, and 3, and then you can hear the other string of shots come out. We're going to analyze it. I'll break it down. We'll take a look at it. However, I do want to pre-stage this a little bit, and for yourself, decide for yourself, does 1, 2, and 3, do they sound the same at all compared to the other ones that you hear? Okay, and remember, we already have the analysis from audio experts elsewhere saying there's a difference between weapon A and weapon B. And I can show you that the rounds fired from weapon B were also aimed at the stage. Okay, so this is important. 2 weapons, one fires a string of 3, another fires a string of 5 or 6, depending on how we count, and off they go. And they were also out hitting the crowd and headed towards Trump. Okay, this is important because now we do not have a lone gunman anymore. Okay, so listen up. Here we go. And then that one more. That's the 6 I'm unclear on. Let's listen to this again. Muffled, and then right? That's what I hear. Ooh. And a lot of screaming. Okay, so let's analyze this now. Let's go into this with a little bit more depth. So video 2, the way I score it, there's about 16.0 seconds from first to last shot, so very consistent with what we're experiencing on the first audio, so that's nice. They kind of line up pretty well. And here's the whole audio from all that screaming and the shots from video 2. We have in blue the first 3 shots here. We have more shots here from a second weapon. I'm not sure about this one. It has a very different sound that we heard. And here's the final last shot, which I believe is from, oops, sorry, don't have my thing. You don't know what I'm pointing at. This is the 5 that make a very distinct sound. Here's one with a very different crack in it. That's the 6th shot in the string. And then here we have the final last one, which I think is the sniper weapon, which is probably the one that put the bullet just over the left eye of Crooks on the roof. So we're going to take a closer look at the blue, the red, the blacks here and listen to these things. But once again, let's just listen very carefully and we'll go back and forth until you're certain of this yourself. Here's just the first 3 shots from that video. I haven't done anything, no audio, I haven't done any enhancements. This is both of these video audio pieces are exactly pulled straight from the video itself. Nothing else. I haven't boosted any, I haven't done any filtering. Raw files, okay? So, and by the way, every instinct in me was to try and minimize all the screaming, but I was like, nope. That just add, like, what did you do? And then there's questions. These are raw files. Here's 1, 2, and 3 to start. Okay, listen to that again. And one more time. Okay, now let's listen to the next string. Ooh. Yeah. Hear that? So 6 sounds different to me, but here's an interesting thing. 1, 2, and 3, besides being muffled and further away, it doesn't have echoes. Here we have, this is a shot here, this one, this peak, oh, darn it, I don't have my thing up again. Here we go. So this here is a shot. This is an echo. Very clearly an echo, and a shot and an echo, and a shot and an echo. So this is actually critical evidence, because you hear that, there's echoes coming off. So that also allows us, again, to analyze where was this gun. But first up, we just have an absolutely different sound between the first 3. There's no echo, it's much further away, it's more muffled, it's just not in the same place at all. But these next ones, very different sound, totally different weapons. Okay, full stop, we have 2 separate weapons, plus we have no echoes coming off of the first 3, and then we do have echoes coming off of the next set. And that last one, that's different. That's not the sniper shot. The sniper shot is another 10 seconds later. So I don't know what number 6 is here, but we're just going to bookmark it for now and go on. So audio analysis conducted by Nick tells us that if those next string of shots, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are coming from shooter, who we're going to call shooter 2, because shooter 1 is sending off those muffled ones. Shooter 2 is very consistent. If somebody was on the roof firing something with a 223 round, those, and here's where audio 2 is recorded from. That we've isolated exactly where the person was standing. They were walking, so there's a little movement, but they were basically right here. The echoes we have is perfectly consistent with conditions, atmospheric conditions of the day, to have bounced off of this building, because that's what you need for an echo. You need a hard, flat surface to echo off of. So that's what we got. We have an echo that perfectly lines up with somebody being up there in shooter number 2 position. Now, here's where it gets a little weirder. So what I've done, and this is, I've taken the first timeline. This is the video number 1's audio, and I've lined it up with video number 2's audio. And for the most part, we're in pretty darn good shape, right? Here you can see, so this is the supersonic crack. So that's the crack of the bullet arriving. And I've lined that up with what I did. I just shifted the timelines to line up with, this is the report of the gun. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gun plus a 6, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've lined up that first blast of the gun with the arrival of the bullet so that it should be consistent, because if you have the explosion, the arrival of it downstream, they ought to line up, right? The timings ought to be the same. So sure enough, shot 1, no problemo, lines up perfectly. This is an echo up top there. Here's the echo down here for shot 1. The top bullet is echoing off of whatever it's echoing up there near the stage. And this is echoing probably off of that building surface we just showed you. So shot 1, 100%, we're good to go. Shot 2, same thing, lines up perfectly. It's got an echo right here. That's that little peak right there. And it's got an echo up top. Everything lines up. Shot 3, though, remember this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one doesn't line up. This one is actually, this shot happens about 0.03 seconds earlier. There's not alignment. It should be right under this peak, but it's not, which means the shot happened 0.03 seconds. It took 0.03 seconds longer for that bullet to get downstream, right? To the microphone in front of the Trump platform there. If that, what does that mean? Well, that means that it's somewhere between, depending on the caliber and, maybe the caliber. I don't have any bullets here. I can't guarantee anything. Depending on a lot of things, the muzzle velocity of whatever this projectile was, and things like that. That 0.03 seconds, assuming it's 2,600 feet per second, that's how fast this thing's traveling. Could be 2,500, could be 3,000. I don't know what they're using, so you have to make some guesses. But it's further away. This implies the possibility that shots 1 and 2, those are fired by crooks, but somebody about 78 to 100 feet further away took shot 3. Then shots 4 and 5 line up again perfectly, but shot 6, hey, that's off the mark again by the same amount. And, there's not quite the echoes that are happening off of shot 3. We don't see the same. There should be an echo right here. There should be an echo right here. We don't see that, not like these big echoes. So there's a chance here, I'm making a chance that there's a possibility of there were 2 weapons being fired that are different from the first one. 1, 2, 3 are from weapon 1. Weapon 2 for sure is in a different spot, but there's a possibility because of those times of weapon 3. So it could be that 1, 2, 4, 5 were taken by crooks on the roof because he heard some stuff going on, decided to take his shots, but 3 and 6 were taken by somebody else another 100 feet away. I don't know, we're going to need more professional audio analysis, but I like it when everything lines up, and everything does line up until we get to there. And then further down the timeline, things get really weird, and things aren't lining up, but we don't know who's firing down at that end of the spectrum either. So some weird stuff down there, but it doesn't line up really well enough for my taste. Okay, so hypothesis. What do we have here? Okay, here's the hypothesis. At least 2 shooters, maybe 3. Don't know. The first 3 shots, I suspect, my hypothesis is they came from inside the building. All right? They were inside that, like if Crooks was on the roof, opened the window, those shots came in from down below. Why do I think that? Because that ensures that the crack boom are consistent with the patsy on the roof. The angles are the same. The crack boom isn't off. There's nothing to analyze, right? If those first 3 shots come out from below Crooks, then it all lines up, right? And this aligns with what we have from video number 2's audio, where it's more distant, it's a muffled sound that would be more consistent with being inside. We don't have it's also the upward slope of that bullet, right? Now that begins to line up if it's true that back victim was struck with bullet 1, and also all the lack of echoes. So everything's consistent with that hypothesis, and it's just a hypothesis. I'm just trying to, put some meats on the bones of what might have happened here, because I know for a fact we had 2 guns, period, maybe 3. I could make a case for 3. I'm not as solid on that. I'm going to wait for expert analysis. But we don't need any further expert analysis to understand there were 2 weapons being fired at the stage, right? Because here's what happened. These these next string of shots down here, which I'm highlighting, this is the recording from video 2. This is, sorry, video 2's, yeah, audio 2, video 2. Video 1, which is taken from the microphone right at the front where Trump is, these are sonic signatures. So these booms led to these cracks, right? These explosions of this weapon resulted in bullets making sonic booms right over the microphone down at Trump stage. So let's be clear. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wasn't like, oh, because I can hear it already. They're like, oh, well, the Beaver County Emergency Services Unit saw him and climbed up and blah, 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 blah. Really, you know, I guess that's what it was. That's not what it was. This second weapon that was fired, leaving the echoes and that sharper crack, that was fired towards the stands. So we have 2 shooters, guaranteed, full stop. Okay. In the second group of shots, I'm positive that 1, 2, 4, and 5, pretty sure those were fired by crooks. Lines up with everything, the echoes, and the snaps recorded downrange, all that. Now, shots 3 and 6 are puzzling. Again, expert analysis will be required here, not me. I'm just a doof with audacity and some common sense. But their delayed arrival downrange suggests they were taken 78 to about 95 feet further back than Crook's position. That would be consistent with somebody being on one of those other roofs just behind him, you know, just in case of you know, mission failure, I guess.
Mission failure. They had an abort button and they pressed it on that dude that day. All right. So now we're getting into the thick of it. You've seen some interesting things, but you should have reserved doubt. I don't know what to think from that. I just know that there's more thinking required because it's not a lone gunman situation, according to several different pieces of evidence. So now we got to go just a little bit deeper with this concept. Now, earlier in the week, I didn't even include it in the show card, but there's people pointing at the water tower and there's some grainy pixelated footage, and I don't know if there's something there or not. It's worth looking in other pieces of footage to see if we can see the water tower activity on the water tower more clearly. I do have footage. I'll have to find the clip because I guess we haven't played it yet, of the cops that have to run the fence over with their car so they can get in, and then a whole bunch of Penn State state cops or Pennsylvania state troopers. They go running off toward the water tower rather quickly, and this is after Trump has left. So why are they going to try to secure the water tower if nothing happened at the water tower? So something may have happened. We have yet to see evidence of that, so we're not going to include it in this week's show, even though it's kind of on the radar. Like, we're waiting for evidence to emerge because that's what this show is about, capturing the evidence and artifacts for present consideration and future study so people can learn about the past in a correct and true way. Before we get to the next clip, which gets a whole lot more interesting, but it builds on what Chris was just laying out there. Scott or Lawrence, do you guys have comments on what we just saw? You guys are Second Amendment friendly. Like, some of these things need to start making sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good breakdown. He did a really good job. And I think it was the first video of the night that actually had the sniper, the Crooks guy, in the right position. So
right, it is one of the few.
Yeah,
for sure.
One of the few.
I also wanted to point out, like, I don't know if Chris's explanation really does the thing. So from my understanding, the round going downrange from a rifle travels, let's say, 3,000 feet per second. I was going to say 3,300, but I don't know how many grains or what the armament was, etc. 3,000 feet per second. So as it travels downrange, it breaks the sound barrier, and relative to anyone's ear, you're going to hear a snap. Now, at the same time, the armament also creates an explosion. And if it's not suppressed, that explosion has to travel downrange. I would assume at that elevation and time of year in Pennsylvania, let's say that's 1,000 feet per second. So it takes 3 times longer for that sound of the gun going off to get downrange, but you would hear the snap first and then the report from the gun. I don't think that the report from the gun is the same as the snap echoing, right? Like, the snap happens, but what you're hearing is that big boom that comes behind it. And that's the snap, boom, snap, boom, snap, boom. And then you hear snap, boom, snap, boom, snap, boom, snap, boom. And then you hear another shot that could have come from Crooks on the roof or whoever that other person was on the roof, right? So there is a way to consolidate and rectify, but I agree with Chris insofar as different cadence and different echo patterns, meaning different distances, and we're going to build out on that evidence next. But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you guys off.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's pretty distinct. Like these are different firearms. So, and according to their story, it's literally just the Crooks guy and then the return fire from the counter sniper team. So doesn't fit.
It's a compelling presentation. I'd say that the way he presented this, the second video that is not the audio from the stage, from the live stream, it's definitely more distinctive there, that second set.
Right. And then as I watched that, I noticed that camera, that phone did turn while we're listening to it. So that might have been like the change between like the stage audio and that person as as we're hearing it. I'm pretty sure their phone changed orientation. That could also have an effect on like where we're hearing the sounds come from. But yeah, I agree. It deserves more study, and it's not saying nothing to see here. It's saying listen closely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I saw one of these recently in relation to the Vegas shooting. It was the first time I'd seen this, but they did the same thing, analyzing the waveforms with an AR with a bump stock, and there's a guy with a bump stock and an AR firing, and then they overlaid that directly with like, the sound you hear from the audio captured on the Vegas shooting. It's very distinct, different, rates of fire and the whole thing. So it's like,
but they were trying to get rid of bump stocks at that time.
Exactly.
So it was convenient.
Yeah, and so it's like, well, you can prove pretty easily that it's a different type of firearm than what they're reporting. So we just have same situation again. Yeah.
As we all know, the Las Vegas shooting is completely solved. There are no questions. Yeah. And the police chief who was in charge of that, he was in charge of Lahaina when they had the fire that BlackRock owned the electric company that didn't do the maintenance and set it up for a fire situation so they could get the property cheap, which is what BlackRock does very well. That's why they're the biggest company in the world, not because they're the worst at what they do. Right.
Yeah. I saw a funny meme. It was that John Pelletier, whatever, right? It was the meme was John Pelletier announced as sheriff or police chief of Butler, Pennsylvania. Like,
it's believable
that's
too.
Funny. And like you wouldn't get that unless you're deep down the rabbit hole, but it was funny. It was pretty good.
What were we gonna say, LD?
Just real quick on I shared this with you the other day, Rich. Just there is a news story out there about, it's reported by local WPXI about
Channel 11.
Yeah, Channel 11. 10 officers, motorcade officers that switched from Jill Biden's detail, went down to the Trump rally. 4 of them were hit by shrapnel. 4 of them were injured. It's unclear like whether they were hit by shrapnel. I think 1 ended up in the hospital. 2 of those 4 were supervisors that were transferred out of the unit, and seems to be possibly that there was a mix-up. They weren't given permission or orders to go from the Jill Biden motorcade to the Trump motorcade. I just think it's interesting because there's like the big mainstream coverage is not mentioning police officers getting injured. It's unclear to see to what extent they were injured, but where were they injured? Is it, I'd like to know.
Yeah,
did they slip in the hydraulic fluid? Did they get shot by shrapnel? I mean, they said shrapnel, so I wouldn't think it's the other things.
Yeah, that's news to me. That's crazy.
Also, I don't have time to play the clip tonight, but check this out. Did you guys know that the Trump campaign has connection to the alleged shooter's dad?
No.
Here's how it unfolds. Trump campaign back in like 2016, they said, who are the people in Pennsylvania who would support Second Amendment? And Crooks's dad, Matthew, allegedly comes up on the list. So the Trump campaign reaches out and is like, hey, can we put some signs in your yard? This sort of stuff, whatever. Right. And that could like tie to the reports that the Crooks family had Trump signs in their yard. Now, if that's a truth, if that thing really happened, let's consider it. Maybe if it's especially during COVID, like, would the kid be taking shit at school if your parents have Trump signs in the yard and everyone's all like, team blue? Possibly. Would he have a grudge against Trump? Possibly. But I don't see that as being a real motive. I just wanted to let you know that Trump campaign did have communication with his dad to be like, hey, will you support this type of thing? And interesting that somebody might have selected that dude's son for such wind up toy
Mm-hmm.
MK Ultra 21st century type of activities. Sirhan them up. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to take the real shots. Sirhan didn't take the real shot, but he did squeeze the trigger. But Bobby Kennedy was shot from behind by his security detail. So there's more to be seen. And this next video, I watched it because I was incredulous. I was like, go ahead, tell me about the water tower or whatever. And he kind of sets it aside, says there's nothing to see there until there's something to see there. I agree. This part, he had me taking notes and screenshots. I've probably taken more screenshots in the past week than I have like in a long time. This was a very arduous episode to prepare for because I felt like I needed to watch a little bit of everything that was out there to find the best and put it in this time capsule so it makes sense so people can actually understand. This next piece goes a long way to helping you understand the sound patterns and how it relates through mathematics, algebra, trigonometry to finite things like reality, which have geospatial maps that we can really get towards some truth in a situation where a fog of war has hidden almost every piece of real substantial, evidence. Now let's go ahead and examine it. This comes from Legally Armed America. I just was introduced to his clips this past week, but I've watched a couple. And this is inspiring analysis, maybe right, maybe wrong. Let's leave it up to you to consider, and then we'll talk along.
When my guest was on, he talked about different positioning of where shooters were. Now, I want you to understand, that is his theory, not mine. I'm simply the vessel that's being used to deliver that information that he had. I do think that he pointed out some very, very accurate points that nobody has seemed to bring up before, and that is an open window on the second floor. That's not likely to be protocol, if you ask me, to have an open window with a clear shot to the president, former president of the United States. I believe that window would have been shut under normal circumstances. This does not seem to be a normal circumstance, so I appreciate my guest yesterday certainly pointing that out. This next video clip that I show you is going to be somebody that has broken down the audio of these shots. And I want to point something out real quick. The video yesterday, we took audio that was on the side of the building where the shooter was. And of course, the phone was moving all over the place, especially whenever shots started being fired. The audio that we're using today is from the Fox News video that everybody has seen. And it's from a stationary camera right in front of Trump. So there's no movement, there's no redirection of any kind of way. So every single sound wave that comes into this microphone that you're going to see today is consistent as far as placement of where that microphone was. So there's no change of direction to give you a different sound, pitch, or whatever of any of these sounds. But this is going to spell out not just that the first 5 rounds were from the same distance. I'm not saying the same rifle. I'm saying the same distance. Meaning that if Crooks were on top of that building further east on that building and just to the west of him out of that window was somebody else shooting, that is roughly that same distance, roughly between 400 and 450 feet. So keep that in mind. This guy is not saying this is the same gun that shot this. He's saying this is the same distance that the shots were fired from.
If you measure the distance or the time duration between these two events, like this right here, if you look at the time codes here and you carefully measure this, it comes out to 0.22 seconds. And 0.22 seconds, if you do the math on that, with some pretty good guesses about muzzle velocity, density, altitude, or air density and humidity and air temperature and so on, then you can get a pretty good guess about the speed of sound. And then by doing some pretty basic algebra, you can calculate the distance from which this round arrived. And if you do the math on this with some pretty basic assumptions, let's see, that distance comes out to about somewhere between 400 and 450 feet, essentially, based on the numbers that you use. And that's consistent with the position of the known shooter, the identified shooter, Crooks, as he has been identified by the media sources and so on. So if you hear the first 3 rounds, this is what it sounds like. And you'll notice then that the distance or the time difference between the snap and the crack is consistent among all these 3 rounds. It's exactly the same. It's 0.22 seconds. So if I play this, that's the same time gap as this. Okay? So we know that those first 3 rounds, which are indicated here, these first 3 rounds are fired from the same distance. And they sound like the same rifle. They have about the same sound quality and sound signature. My initial analysis focused on these first 3 because I was trying to identify what's the distance of the shooter, the shooter that got off the first rounds. And that question was definitely answered. But we're going to focus on these things right here. So listen to it at half speed.
So I think he's pretty accurate in that. Again, it's likely that these came from the same very much distance and likely the same caliber too, because they do have a very similar pitch. So we have that out of the way. Again, not saying it's one gun, could be 2. This next one is a little bit different. Now I want you to pay particular attention. Remember, the first grouping that he sees from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 were 0.22 seconds apart between the crack and the report of the gun. Now, just real quick, just so people understand what he's talking about here. When you're shooting a supersonic bullet that travels faster than the speed of sound, if you're on the other end, the bad end of being shot at, the bullet's traveling faster than the speed of sound, so you're actually going to have the crack of the speed of sound, of the bullet breaking that speed of sound as it gets to you or gets close to you. You'll hear that crack first of it breaking. Then that sound is traveling, because remember, the sound is traveling slower than the speed of the bullet. Then the sound of the report of the firearm gets to you. So you have the crack, and then you have the sound of the gun. That's the order that he's going to be explaining this. So just keep that in mind.
So you would expect that right here, this must be round number 6, is what you're probably thinking, right? So let's listen. Is this round number 6? Does this have snap boom? Let's listen. Whoa. That's not snap boom. That's snap snap. Wait a minute. What's going on? That's actually 2 incoming rounds. These are the 2 more incoming rounds that we just heard, 2 snaps. You notice how they're much closer together. So that is not, we haven't yet heard the report of the rifle, have we? We've heard 2 incoming rounds. Got it? Okay, so after that, we hear 2 reports. Got it? This snap, this boom. And this distance right here can tell us, this time gap can give us an estimate of the distance or of this shooter. And that snap and that report in this normal speed audio file, they're not 0.22 seconds apart. They're 0.36 seconds apart. Or that's almost twice the time gap between the snap and the report. So that means that the bullet that made this snap, which is the same bullet as the bullet that made this report, is much farther away than the first 3 rounds and round number 4 and number 5. Just ballpark, if we were just take a rough guess, if it's about twice the time distance, you might suppose it's a little bit less than twice the actual ground distance. So maybe that's 800 feet or give or take. We'll actually do the math and we'll get the right number on that, but it's not 400 feet.
That's the 6th round. So already he has pointed out a second distance, not a second gun. He's not talking about type of gun or anything like that. He's not telling you what the guy shot. He's telling you where they shot from, which is kind of what we want to know, right? I mean, we do want to know caliber and all that too. They're hiding all the spent casings and all that kind of stuff from us. But at least if we know the distances, this is not something that the government can hide from us. Now we're starting to realize that some of this stuff simply doesn't add up. If there was only one shooter, as the government mentions, and the only other person who pulled a trigger that day, according to the federal government, was the counter sniper team that fired one shot, and in this string of shooting that we're looking at now, he's not fired a shot yet. So his time hasn't come. This is all, everything we're looking at here is all supposed to be Crooks. The one shooter, as the government calls him, has fired all of these shots up to now, right? So keep that in mind. So just to recap, we're at a point where the first 5 shots were approximately 400 to 450 feet away based on algebra, math, right? The 6th shot was 0.36 seconds between the break of the sound barrier and the crack of the gun, or the report of the gun. That's roughly 800 feet. There's no way that 6th shot was fired on top of the same roof that Crooks was on. That roof is not big enough. He could have gone to the opposite end of it and not gotten 400 feet away. Now, why does that matter? And why did I not say emphatically that there wasn't anybody on that water tower? You know why? Because I pulled numbers on the water tower and how far it was from that microphone that we got that audio from right in front of Trump. Using Google Earth, which anybody out there can go do this themselves and pull these numbers up and get this exact same number yourself, that's the water tower over to the right. It's pointing directly at that yellow line, ends right in front of Trump. That distance is 245 meters, which comes out to 803 feet. Didn't we just get through saying that the distance of that 6th shot was 800 feet? And the water tower is 803 feet. Now, granted, the water tower is higher. This does not take into account that elevated area, so I don't know the additional feet going up that angle to the top of the water tower, but certainly from the base of the water tower to the microphone in front of Trump, it's 803 feet. My point is, there could have been somebody at the water tower. I just can't confirm that black blob on top of it that's moving all over the place and deforming itself was an actual person. But I certainly am not sitting here telling you there was nobody on the water tower somewhere.
What you're going to hear in this group is Bullet 7 arriving, the rifle report of the shot of number 6, and then the rifle report of the shot of Bullet 7. Listen to this. Hear it? What if we measure this distance then between the incoming snap of this round and the boom of this rifle? And I did go ahead and do the algebra on that one. And let me tell you the assumptions I made. I made the assumption of muzzle velocity at an average of 3,000 feet per second. And the reason I chose that instead of 2,500 feet per second is because, well, you know, I'm an accomplished long-range shooter. And if I were taking that shot, I would have used a much larger caliber, ideally something like 300 Win Mag. I would have used a small grain bullet in a 300 Win Mag cartridge. A bullet on the order of like 178 grains, something like that, which is a pretty small bullet for the large amount of gunpowder charge in the cartridge. And the reason that you would do that is to get much higher velocity, to give you a flatter trajectory, and also a lot less of flight time, which means your round is less susceptible to wind. And anyway, with that assumption at 3,000 feet per second, then that distance comes out to, if I did the math right, 1,386 feet. Not yards, but feet. So let's just round that to 1,400 feet away.
So that's crazy. That's not the sniper shot yet, guys. This entire string of shots that we just talked about up to now still don't include the sniper shot. So now we have an additional shot in addition to the 2 places already. Remember, one's 400 feet away, one's 800 feet away. Now we're 1,400 feet away with another shot that's not the counter sniper team. That raises a lot of questions for me, because that's a tremendous distance away from everything else that we've been looking at up to now. Heck, the water tower was far away, if you ask me, as far as the proximity of where these shots are likely to have come from. Now we're talking about 1,400 feet away. So I went to the fairground again on Google Earth, and what I want to do is plot the possibilities on this piece of property where that could have come. Now you see, again, that's my first mark right there. If you go to Google Earth, they're really good about how you can get approximations and really close on what your distances are that you can plot onto the actual map itself. What I started to do, and this is kind of a funny story, I'm gonna tell you as a side note real quick. What I did was the red circle is plotted out 1,400 feet all the way around. So the farthest line that you see is 1,400. There's a shorter line right next to each one of those. That is going to be 1,200 because I'm giving some room for error for this long shot. I'm trying to determine where this long shot came from. So I'm assuming it could have been a lower caliber rifle. So I'm taking into account a little bit of room for error. Now, as I put this together, this is kind of funny and kind of weird. Never had this happen to me on Google Earth before. As I'm putting it together, I go to take a screenshot of it and look down the bottom, graphics rendering, context lost. So I go back and all my illustrations are gone. So I redid it again. I just wanted to mention that real quick. Kind of strange that happened. So when I do this, if you notice the yellow line is 1,400 feet out. The blue line is 1,200 feet out. So I figure between the blue circle and the yellow circle is roughly where that shot came from. Because in the center there is that microphone right in front of Trump's stage. So inside that circle, or at least very close to it, is where that additional shot came from. Now, there's a lot of places out here that shot could have come from, but what I wanted to show you is there's also a lot of things that would get in the way of line of sight to be able to shoot. So take a little trip with me here, and we're going to look pretty much at the entire area. Of course, I don't have the circle on here, but you can spot some approximations on there. There's trees in the way, so that really takes out some of these shots. There's a lot of these shots that just don't have a chance because there's not a clear line of sight. We're also looking for elevated surfaces. We also need to keep in mind that whoever shot this shot, they either were shooting at Trump or they were shooting at Crooks, right? So we also have to keep in mind, like in this look that you're looking at right here, they couldn't have hit either one of them because they're behind Trump, behind the buildings, and they were also on the wrong side of that slope to be able to shoot Crooks. So we can automatically discredit a lot of these things right off the bat. And I'm actually making the assumption that this could have been a shot that took Crooks out. That last sniper shot that they say was fired, it's possible that that shot may not have been the one that ended Crooks. This other shot that's in a really, really great distance away, of course you would want to be hidden if you're doing something that's covert, that's not part of the actual plan, or at least not what's supposed to be seen. In most cases, that's probably why they would have used the guy from a great distance to make that shot. They don't want him to be seen. So if I come around to the backside of that warehouse where Crooks was on, again, he was on that downside slope on this side of it. The picture that you're looking at right here, Trump is going to be up north from us where those lines go to. You see the water tower there. This is one of the only, and if you want to call it a line of sight, this barn right here in front of you. I see this barn and I'm like, well, maybe that's an elevated surface, even though it's an unsafe elevated surface. But it still doesn't have a clear shot to Crooks as far as being on the back side of that building because the rest of the building blocks it. So what I did is I went and I plotted some additional lines on this map. You'll see these red lines. These red lines are lines to Crooks. Okay, we're going to assume that that shot possibly could have been meant for Crooks, not for Trump. Because by this time, all the shots going at Trump were already done. By the time we got to that sixth or so shot, there wasn't another shot that went towards Trump. The fifth or sixth shot was the last one that impacted anything nearby Trump. So we have to assume that those other rounds went somewhere else. Where would they likely be? Again, only two people were being shot at this day, Trump and Crooks. So let's assume those shots were going at Crooks. That's where I drew these red lines. I drew essentially so you could see where the shot likely would come from a rifle effectiveness. Anything further than that would have been blocked by almost everything out there. So again, if we're going to tour this area, let's look at some possibilities here. This shot right here from this barn would have shot across the entire audience towards Crooks and right in front of Trump. As I circle around, there's not much more of this that either had a clear line of sight. You see trees in the way. You see a number of things in the way like buildings, whichever. So if somebody was shooting a gun from 1,400 feet away at crooks, that's what the red line designates. And you see a lot of stuff in the way, a lot of stuff, not clear lines of sight towards crooks, except when I look across the street from where the Trump rally was. That's the building that Crooks was on. And look at the red line right in front of us coming towards us. We're backing up here to a building across the highway from where Crooks was. You see the side of one tree in the way. I'm not saying this is where somebody was shooting from. I'm telling you that this is an elevated surface with a clear line of sight straight across that field. No body likely in the way and nothing likely in the way. And it meets all the requirements as far as elevated surface and the distance required for it to have met that microphone in the right amount of time to equate to 1,400 feet from that microphone. So this fits into the distance that a round could have been effective to take crooks out and meets the mathematical distance necessary for the microphone audio to give us this distance. Am I saying that's where a round came from? I'm not. What I'm telling you is somebody shot a round, one round, from 1,400 feet away from the microphone sitting right in front of Donald Trump. And that round did not go into the crowd. That round went somewhere else. And I gotta repeat, only 2 people were being shot at that day, Trump and Crooks, according to the Secret Service. These people are not answering our questions. We should be loud. We should continue to ask these questions because this is one of 2 things, guys. This is either a screw up or it's a cover up. It could be both. Either someone screwed up and completely failed and they don't know what's going on, and their report that there's a lone gunman is a flat out lie, or they could be too stupid and just not know. And I don't believe that. I don't believe they're that stupid. These are very intelligent people that have these jobs. I think they know there was more than one shooter. Either their guys, they had more people shooting at crooks and they're just lying about that, or there were more people shooting in Trump's direction also. But make no mistake, there was at least, according to actual data, science, math, according to that, there's at least 3 different distances that these shots were fired from. Not 3 different guns. It's not like we have this fantasy that crooks picked up 3 different guns and shot them and they gave us 3 different sounds. We're not talking about sounds and we're not talking about the type of gun. We're talking about mathematical triangulation to get back to a location, again, using algebra, to figure out based on the actual audio that we all have access to. And we know without a doubt that we're dealing with distances of 400 feet, 800 feet, and 1,400 feet. And no way do all 4 of those shots come from that rooftop, and no way do they come from those other rooftops. Because these other rooftops that we're talking about where the counter snipers were, those don't add up either. And again, that final shot that the federal government says came from the counter sniper team behind Trump on the right side of him, that shot did not come for many seconds after this entire string of shots were fired. Guys, please like, subscribe, share. These videos don't last very long.
Yeah, I'm sure the volume 25 of the Merrick Garland Commission report on the attempted assassination of Donald J. Trump will explain how that all works. And we reserve the right to be wrong. I'm not making assumptions. I'm just putting that on the record as that seems to be a legit interpretation of the audio waveform evidence. And I could go check Mike Adams's algebra and math and such. But traditionally, like, these are things that he knows about and does on a regular basis. And his math has checked out in the past. So I can verify and then continue trust. So I'm going to have to do some algebra and we'll see, what these distances might look like. Maybe certain assumptions in those algebraic calculations lead to it's not 1,400, it's actually 1,200 feet or 1,100 feet or something like that. So This is early on. It just happened 7 days ago. We're working with the evidence that we have in front of us at the time, and we're going to continue to keep an open mind, try to understand and not assume that any of this stuff is the cut and dry final version of it. But Lawrence, Scott, what did you guys think of that one?
I thought it was pretty well done. I mean, the thing that struck me too is just like, okay, so even if we do have somebody on the secret servers or DHS or whoever like 1,400 feet away, like why would they be 1,400 feet away and not on the roof that he was on?
Exactly.
Like so crazy. Like none of it makes sense, man.
But you could have a shooter 1,400 feet away on that roof to shoot Trump. That could be what's recorded, and maybe that shot didn't hit. You also have the problem with the rising trajectories, which means somebody's low firing up, not on a water tower firing down. There's these other little nuances yet to be worked out, these little contradictions that are not necessarily real contradictions. You just got to walk to the other side and see that perspective. And it's like the cover of Gödel, Escher, and Bach, right? You look at this wood block, it has a shadow this way that does this, and does this, but it's all the same thing. So we have much more to learn on this, and I'm sure they're going to teach us a bunch this upcoming week. I wanted to make honorable mention of a video. Like, this is part of the whole title for this episode is defining the deep state, and this was an excellent little segment that Whitney Webb did with Clayton, and I don't have time to play the whole thing or even really give you guys a sample tonight, but I do highly recommend, if you're not familiar with Whitney Webb's work and her books on the deep state, it's not the Deep State Encyclopedia. It's One Nation Under Blackmail, volumes 1 and 2. And you can get those variety places like Trine Day Books. Chris Milligan publishes those. So we don't have time to play that. I did give Whitney an invite for the very independent producer conference on September 7th coming up. So honorable mention for that.
Everyone's doing some kind of self-help these days, and you can find a million self-help courses out there. Most other courses out there are hosting lectures. They're hosting videos, they're maybe even doing Q&As, and these are great starting points to encourage learning. But at Autonomy, we believe that hands-on practice is the best way to really lock in what we're learning. There's no better way to gain confidence and mastery than through action. After each lecture, we practice the concepts we've learned with other students, giving and receiving feedback in a non-judgmental environment. The result is mastery of concepts like entrepreneurship, ethical sales, and self-reliance in an environment that directly translates to the real world. Plus, you make connections with other like-minded individuals who are learning right alongside you, and you have a lifetime membership in the community. The Autonomy course with Richard Grove equips you with confidence, competence, and courage in a world filled with confusion and noise. You can learn more at getautonomy.info. We'll see you there.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come